he was involved in the survey. I believe it was the DC bar and the California bar. And that survey tells us that lawyers' mental health struggles have gotten worse during the pandemic. And drinking and depression, and that exact issue has been discussed widely, especially within the legal profession.
Well, when I was drinking, and during that year, I drank a lot more. I did, and I drank a lot more until about December, and then we did a dry January, and then I kept it under control.
1, 2, 3, go.
Jennifer Hardy, har.
Believe it or not.
Welcome to the Lawyer Dana Show.
The Lawyer Dana podcast.
Wow, we have a lot to talk about.
And we're going to do it right after this.
Welcome to the Lawyer Dana podcast.
So, we always like to talk about marriage, and you're married now.
Yes, Amanda, it's wonderful. I love her.
We were just talking about this. So they've been together 17 years.
Going on 17 years.
Nice.
Yeah, but they've been married. But they've been married 5.
And married 5.
Yeah, going 5.
Healthy marriage?
I think so.
Excellent.
I think she thinks so. But every marriage is a marriage, right?
Exactly.
But,
it's not. Disney's a liar. There's no such thing as happily ever after. It's a series of intentional decisions that you make in order to have a good, healthy marriage. It's not an accident.
And Amanda and I, we get along. I mean, we were the kind of as good a match as you can be, because she doesn't drink. She's a very light drinker. We're not social. She's not we're not social butterflies. She's a very hard worker. She's a legal recruiter. And so we both work from home and have found our symbiosis, right? And so we go out to eat, we go out to restaurants, we travel, and we do the things we like to do. And we've had a wonderful going on 17 years. At least I think so. I think she'd agree.
Congratulations. That's excellent. We are big fans. Despite the fact that I own a law firm that primarily does divorces, I view myself as the guard at the gate, and my general rule is thou shalt not pass.
And you have to remember, I've been through 3 marriages. She's my 4th marriage.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. I always joke when I talk, one more I get a free set of steak knives. But, she's my,
I don't know. I think the wife still gets the steak knives.
I didn't get steak knives, but I got the most wonderful, I hate that grand wife in the world.
That's excellent.
But
well, I hope it works out for sure.
Yeah. So I've had 3 marriages that didn't last 2 years, all because of drugs and alcohol. None of them.
Yeah.
So
I think the first one was actually we were just too young, but I was also doing cocaine and this and that. But
that's the recipe for a disaster and a marriage that's ending.
So Amanda and I we do great, and as you see, I text her to let her know I'm gonna be late. Not that I had to, I just thought I should.
Yeah, but that's awesome.
And that's the key. Thoughtfulness goes a long way.
And we can talk about what precipitated my quote unquote rock bottom, and I hate that term too, because it assumes the worst has to happen in life, for you to recover, and it doesn't, and it shouldn't, right?
Hopefully
the goal
not.
should be to recover at the highest possible point before you wipe out a family on a highway. So it's funny. I got into this on LinkedIn with someone just today. It's there on my LinkedIn feed. Someone said, you have to experience the hard times to recover. And I want to say, you know what? Tell that to the family wiped out on the and I said, no, that's just dangerous. It's nonsense and it's dangerous, because the goal should be to recover at the highest possible point. Tell that to the family that got wiped out, to their survivors. Oh, but he recovered. He found his bottom to recover, so we'll find some solace in that. And it's just a ridiculous, and you see again, you see it a lot in the 12-step, right? In the 12-step,
I think
it's just ridiculous.
I think that that expression, that thought is he won't. They're gonna refuse to get there until they hit that, and then hopefully then at final last, then they'll come back. Well, I think the objective is to get somebody before that happens.
Absolutely, and that's difficult, and that is one of the most difficult things ever. Most difficult things ever, and that's why we talk about rock bottom, because at least anecdotally, I don't know if there are any studies on it. We always see, someone had a DWI, his rock bottom. I had a DWI, it wasn't my rock bottom. That's a great story. Do you know Rich Warfield?
Nope.
Criminal lawyer in Dallas. I got a great story about my DWI. But it wasn't funny at the time, but on reflection it is. This happened or that happened. But, those are, okay, he got the DWI, that's his rock bottom, but he also could have, instead of just getting the DWI, wiped out a family. Right? Yeah. Would that have been the rock bottom? It's a meaningless term to me. what does it take to get somebody to believe in their, in their future, to believe in hope and their recovery?
Exactly.
That is the $1 zillion question.
That is.
Not an act. What does it take to change a mindset?
It's always the mindset.
Yeah. Well, and some
Number
people
one
don't
theme
change.
of this podcast is mindset.
And some people don't and some people you can't, and you see tragic results.
Yeah.
A guy, the last guy I tried a case with, I've been in a courtroom. Sometimes drunk, sometimes high on cocaine, sometimes under the influence of Xanax. Great stories there too. But so the last guy I tried a case with, my friend Gary, and we had worked at a firm together. Brilliant lawyer when he was sober, but by the time we even became friends, his hands were shaking, and he was really deep into alcohol use disorder, a really alcoholism, and so. But when he was sober, he was brilliant, but that wasn't all the time. So he had been arrested. He got arrested for possession, and he was just struggled. He was showing up. I would refer him stuff, family law stuff, and I would hear that he had showed up and they smelled alcohol on him. So, but then we got together on a case. It was a bench trial, and he was brilliant. And then I knew when he was struggling because his phone, all of a sudden his voicemail would be full.
Oh.
Right? So I knew when he was struggling, he would
Interesting.
disappear. And
We have that same problem with clients occasionally.
Yeah, and his voicemail would be full. So, and then he just disappeared. And I didn't know how to get a hold of him. His voicemail was filled. And I'm driving one day down Northwest Highway in Dallas, and I passed this bus stop, and it's 100 degrees out. And I look to my right. I know that guy. So I go down and do a U-turn, and it's my friend Gary sitting at this bus stop. And
What's he doing at the bus stop?
I pick him up, and he was living in a sober home that was on the bus route.
Oh.
In a men's sober home not far from there. And that was the first I knew he was living there. He had been kicked out of his place. He no longer had a place to live. He no longer had a car.
You talked about that in The Addicted Lawyer,
Yes,
don't
I
you?
do.
So, as a quick promotion, The Addicted Lawyer, one of Brian's books. We've also got The Ambulance Chaser, his fiction, which is excellent. And this is how far I've gotten into the Addicted Lawyer. I'm right there. But this is how far Dream, my dog, got into it. And but pick up a copy of it. It's an excellent, both of them, excellent.
So I picked Gary up, and we got into a habit. I would see him, and I would take him down to Central to Cafe Brazil, get him something to eat.
Yeah.
And so, and I'd give him some money. And I had seen in the back of the Texas Bar Journal that he had been disbarred. And so I said, I saw you had problems with the bar. And he said, yeah, but it's not my fault, and all the things people who haven't changed their mindset go into, right?
Yeah.
He was in denial the whole way. Never was able to turn it around. And he went through stretches, and he did try, but he just never got it. Why some people get it and some people don't. When we talk about in the 12-step rooms, he just never got it. So, and we just got into this habit where I'd give him some money, get him something to eat, and take him to the home, and take him there. And the reason he was also at that bus stop is because our 12-step group, we went to the same 12-step group. So for the noon meeting. And so we'd go to meetings together, and then he disappeared again. And then he shows up on Facebook. And it was when Shattered Image came out, and I was having my launch party. I was on the Katie Couric show for Shattered Image.
Oh, wow.
For eating disorders.
Yeah.
And so I ended up being on the Katie Couric show in New York. And so we were going to have a watching party. And so Gary messages me and put together the watching party in North Dallas, and he messaged me, I'm coming. He shows me the picture of the ticket. I said, great. I said, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm in New York with my family now. I said, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm a paralegal, but I'm going to go back into the practice of law. I'm licensed in New York. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. Isn't it reciprocal? And I didn't want to go into that. And I was really worried because did he trigger an ethical duty in me?
Right.
And so I asked a guy in New York. He said, well, it depends. It was, why he was disbarred and, is it disbarable in New York and blah, blah, blah. But it never got to the point where I made a decision because it wasn't long after that I got a message on Facebook from his ex-wife. He was hit by a truck walking down the middle of a highway,
God.
killed.
Oh my
Gary.
gosh.
Just never got it. Just never got it.
Oh man.
And,
That's
and
terrible.
there, I know. I mean, I've seen it before. I've lost friends to overdoses. I have
had a
friends who have been to prison. I have
Yeah.
friends who are still in prison, and that could have been me.
Yeah,
That could have been me.
I actually
One of the
lost
most.
my
go ahead.
brother to
Oh,
drugs.
Did you?
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
He didn't overdose, but I mean he did one time and almost died, and we have no idea how he survived.
Yeah.
His temperature got to 112 degrees.
Oh wow.
I didn't
Yeah.
know you could.
Y-
That could even happen.
Yeah. So, but yeah, he had stuffed some drugs underneath the car, and he was trying to get them out, and the jack on the car broke, and the car fell on top
Oh,
of him. So,
man.
yeah.
Sorry to
so
hear that.
Recently, I had a friend who he worked at Three Forks. He was one of the head waiters, and when the government was paying him to not go back to work, he was making the same amount of money to not work, and so he was one of the ones that refused to go to work. But the problem is the only time he didn't drink was when he was at work.
And
so
we
he
have-
then he woke up and drank all day long, and he drank himself to death.
And that has been talked about quite a bit, written about quite a bit. We know from a recent survey done by this guy Patrick Krill, who wrote the foreword to the ambulance chase. He's very involved in the addiction field, and he writes a lot and he speaks a lot. He was involved in the survey. I believe it was the DC bar and the California bar, and that survey tells us that lawyers' mental health struggles have gotten worse during the pandemic. Drinking and depression, and that exact issue has been discussed
Yeah.
widely, especially within the legal profession.
Well, when I was drinking, and during that year, I drank a lot
Yeah.
more.
You-
I mean, I did, and I drank a lot more until about December, and then we did a dry January, and then I kept
Yeah.
it under control, and then I think that must have been 2021, and then I quit completely in September.
Yeah. But yeah,
It was easy to do.
It is, and it's just the journeys are always rocky. I mean, Gary's didn't make it, and me. I mean, I was this close. I was this close, standing on the precipice, and I mean, going back to, Mark bought the Mavs, and I was really spiraling out of control. When the Mavs went to the playoffs for the first time in 2006, and I think I talk about this in the book, when they went to the NBA championship in 2006 and played the Heat, I was able to get some tickets for friends, right? I was getting great seats, and I got a couple tickets. I called up my brother and got tickets for friends. I didn't give it to my friends. I didn't sell them on eBay. I traded them to my drug dealer for $1,000 in cocaine.
You do talk about that in the
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
And so my dealer shows up at my house. I hand him the 2 tickets, and I didn't sell them on eBay because I thought that'd be disrespectful. But trading them to my drug dealer was perfectly acceptable.
That seems perfectly logical.
How the mind works in addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he shows up at my house. I give him the 2 tickets. He gives me this giant Ziploc baggie of raw cocaine. So I go running up to my home office, and I take a book. I take one of my books, and I dump it out on my desk like I'm Scarface, right? Looking at it like this, and I'm banging the rocks to grind it down.
Are they not just flying everywhere?
Yeah, and I'm bringing it back in, and I'm banging on these raw cocaine, and then I go downstairs and get my little spaghetti strainer that every dealer and every person struggling with the cocaine addiction knows. You go to Tom Thumb and get the spaghetti strainer because you put the rocks in a spaghetti strainer, you take a spoon and you strain it out into the powder. I mean, when I was struggling with addiction, I must have went through 50 spaghetti strainers from Tom Thumb.
Oh my gosh.
And that was I
You
always had
know
it.
that the people at Tom Thumb are like,
Yeah.
this
Oh.
guy's back again. He's bought 5 strainers. I'm pretty sure he's on
Yeah.
cocaine.
Oh, I travel. I try the first thing when I go to Miami. I meet my drug dealer. First thing I did, I put the spaghetti strainer in my suitcase, or Las Vegas, But at that point, really, we're 2006, and still prior to recovery. And I was already met Amanda, and Amanda and I were dating, and she didn't know about any of this, and so
When did she find out?
we'll get there.
Okay.
We'll get there.
Stay tuned.
Yes. And so, but at that point, I was really just, at the low, and cocaine was no longer giving me that feeling of confidence and self-love that I achieved when I did it in the bathroom it was called Bonash in the Crescent Hotel. downtown.
Oh, yeah.
Remember Bo Nash?
I know
Now
Bo
it's
Nash.
Nobu, I think.
Yes.
It's still Nobu. And
Yes.
a friend of mine introduced me to a drug dealer there, and he gave me my first line of cocaine. And I was like, wow, for the first time in my life, for the first time in my 40-something years, I looked in the mirror and loved myself for the first time.
So how you were in your 40s when you did cocaine?
No, I mean, yeah, no, but I had done cocaine most of my adult life, dating back to 1980. I did it. Yeah, no, that was 1987. The summer of 1987 was the first time I did cocaine. So that was my 20s.
And that's when you, and so that was the first time
I was
you
in my
had-
40s when the Mavs thing. The
Oh,
ticket.
gotcha.
But so yeah, that was the first time I did cocaine in the bathroom downstairs of Bo Nash of the Crescent Hotel. Not quite the marketing advertisement for the Crescent, but
Wow.
yeah, Bo Nash is long gone, and I know I wasn't the first person to do that.
Oh, I'm
No.
sure there's.
So
Unfortunately, there was a lot of that.
probably
going
happened
on
this
down
week.
there.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, and all of a sudden I'm like, yeah, okay. I mean, the feeling of loving yourself when you've never ever loved yourself and virulently hated yourself was just so overpowering. I walk up and yeah, but then the cocaine wears off and I hate myself again. I found that dealer. I gave him every cent I had for a little baggie, and I went down and I loved myself again. Went down again and I loved myself again. It wore off and I had to love myself again. And I became very quickly psychologically addicted
Oh yeah.
to
Really
loving
quickly.
myself in the dopamine.
Yep.
And because I needed it, because I hated myself otherwise, and I would eventually become physically dependent on it as well. Two different things, right?
Yep. Very
Physical
much.
dependence and addiction are not the same.
Correct.
So yeah, and that was the beginning, and it went through my. I mean, did we talk about the bar exam? I failed the bar exam 3 times, all drugs and alcohol related. The first time I took the Texas bar exam was in a Roadway Inn, just outside the Will Rogers Coliseum in Fort Worth, and the weekend before, my study aids were bar review books I'd borrowed that weekend. Like I was,
That's a touch a little late.
yeah, 3.5 ounces of cocaine, affectionately known as an 8-ball, and a liter of Tab. Those were my study aids for the
Well,
first.
you might. I think with the cocaine, I was a little skeptical, but when you told me you had to tab, I was like,
Yeah.
well, there might be some hope.
Yeah.
Maybe you can get
And,
through
and
with
so,
the
as you might
tab.
imagine, I failed, and I failed it again. But then when I failed it the second time, I passed half of it. In Texas, you can.
Yeah, right.
So the third time, I passed the.
Did they make you retake the whole thing, or did
No, because I passed the multi-state in essay, and I failed the Texas procedure.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't know how they do it now, but back then you could pass one half and fail the other. So the
interesting.
third time I took the Texas procedure
I
and
think
passed.
when I took it, because I took it in 06, and I didn't even study the procedure part because I knew I was going to be so strong on the rest. And I mean, I got an incredible score on the whole thing, but I don't think they had it to where you could fail one part and
Yeah, it was then. That was the way it was
yeah.
then. And so I was working as an adjuster at that time for a trucking insurance company here in Dallas, Transport Insurance. And so I passed that. And then I was kind of devious. And while I was working at Transport Insurance, I was also being a plaintiff's lawyer on the side. My brother Mark bought me my first computer, and it was the best, this old Compaq at CompUSA. It was a gift from him, and he bought me, I think it was a dot matrix printer, and
Fancy.
I created my own letterhead, and this is where I became the epitome of Better Call Saul. I was not an ethical lawyer. I was not. It was more important to me to get money to support my drug habit. And I know people will be wondering, well, does he have his life? Was he disbarred or suspended? No, but it wasn't for a lack of trying. And then I say that tongue in cheek, but you open the Texas Bar Journal, those suspensions and the disbarments,
Almost all of
a
them.
very high percentage will correlate to drug and alcohol
Yep.
use or some other mental health issue.
Yeah.
And so,
It's very rarely ever that somebody is just a bad person. It's usually drug or alcohol related.
or gambling, people that took
Gambling.
gambling. Gambling has a very high correlation
some kind
to
of
disbarment.
financial desperation from some sort, or also there's quite a few that are law firm management. They weren't taught how to actually run the business of a law firm, and they get behind the snowball.
Yeah. But I think you see the majority are drug and alcohol related.
Absolutely.
So So I developed this ring of chiropractors. They were all generally in East Texas, East Dallas, Mesquite, Garland, all these. Some were off 183, and it was back during the era of pagers, right?
Yeah.
So I would get a page, and I had to carry around a roll of quarters, and I would go call, and one of them would say, "We have a fish," and get down here. So I would drive down there, and I would sit in the lobby with my briefcase, my Sears suit from my college graduation, my contingency agreements, and my letters of protection.
Yep.
And if you're a plaintiff's lawyer, I don't know how it's done now. This was so
Same
long
way.
ago. And so
You need a client agreement and a letter of protection. Yeah.
And so she would come out with the client. "Oh, Mr. Cuban, what are you doing here?" And this is kind of my Better Call Saul moment, right?
You were Better
like
Call
I write
Saul.
it in the book. Like I wrote about something like that in
Did
the
you tell the client Saul good man?
Yeah. Well, this is decades before Better Call Saul. But Mr. Cuban, what are you doing here? Mr. Cuban's one of our top trial lawyers. Mr. Cuban's never tried a case. Mr. Cuban will get you maximum settlement. Mr. Cuban will sell you down the river. Mr. Cuban will cut his fee. Mr. Cuban will take nothing or hand it off to another lawyer so he doesn't have to step in a courtroom. And just look at that as a cost of doing business. Now you have to remember, this is before they changed the rules, right? So now you can't just do that. You have to
Yeah.
be part of the case.
Yeah.
And so this was before that.
Yep.
And so I was an unethical lawyer, and I don't say that as a badge of pride. I say that as somebody I was struggling with, and I shortchanged my clients. I didn't give my clients their money's worth, and I feel terrible about that. And I tried to make living amends for that, right? I can't go back decades. And figure out, what I can do. But yeah, and that's how I made a living, and I made good money doing that. I made good money just with doing this shady chiropractor stuff. And I say that with all due deference to the wonderful plaintiff lawyers I know who have relationships with chiropractic, do that, and they do it right. They do it right. I was not one of those lawyers. I'm not trying to disparage plaintiffs' lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
I just was a lawyer who should be disparaged,
Got
me
you.
personally. So that is how I made a living.
Takes a lot of courage for you to admit that.
And I was taking cases that I shouldn't take. I remember I took a DWI, and again, I was playing with people's lives, and now I'm playing with people's freedom. Okay, this is where it gets
that's a
even
big
worse.
deal.
Now I'm playing with people's freedom. I took a DWI up in Denton. Well, I'm from Dallas. I'm positioning myself. I don't know where Denton is compared to where we are. When you live in Dallas, it's up
20
in
miles
Denton.
north.
Yeah, when you live in Dallas, it's up in
So
Denton.
up.
I don't know. But so I show up at the courthouse, and it's the first time DWI. I have no clue what I'm doing. And I go to someone says, "Well, go talk to the ADA." And my guy, he had gotten a DWI going through the airport. Okay, he wasn't from Texas. So I go to the ADA, and I said, let's talk a deal. And he goes, "Your client doesn't even live here. He's going to jail." And the guy was messing with, the guy was just being a dick because he knew I didn't know what I was doing. So this
It's
other
actually kind of funny. if you
yeah,
think
the other
about it.
defense attorney is listening. There's a defense attorney in there who took pity on me, and he's listening, and he calls me over and says, he's jerking you, okay? Call, he said, call the court in wherever this guy was from, wherever, I'm not going to identify the state, the city. Call someone there, and I forget who he told me to call, get them to agree to telephone probation. First time offense, nobody was hurt. This is done every day, right?
Yeah.
And so, he made me jump through the hoops, but I got it done. But that was one where I said, you know what? Where I at least had the presence of mind to say, this is not right. I am messing with people's freedom. And I never did that again.
That's good.
Yeah.
And I never did that
Well, and then
again.
that one worked out well, so
And
good.
yeah, well, I mean, the guy got what anyone else would have got.
Right.
Right. So, but again, I never should have taken it. I took it because I needed money to buy drugs.
Well, a lot of times lawyers take cases that they shouldn't take because they need the money. And that's, I have a company called the Worthy Vision Company. It's actually the company that puts on this podcast and that Brenda is the CEO for, Chief Operating Officer for. And we teach lawyers how to run the business of a law firm so that they don't have to take a case that they know that they shouldn't. And we go through extensive screening on how we teach them how to, what cases
Well,
to
public
take
speakers
and
do
go.
that as well. one of the first things I talk to a lot, I've gotten to a place where I can kind of teach it, right?
Yep.
Don't take a gig that you are not competent to speak at, or only tangentially competent because you want the money, right? Because all that's going to happen is you're going to piss off a meeting planner, you're going to piss off the host, it will get around and you will never get hired again. And I'm living proof of that. I remember back before I wrote The Addicted Lawyer, I got a little bit of a reputation speaking about First Amendment stuff. And it was only not because I'm a First Amendment expert, not because I've ever tried a First Amendment case. There was an issue. I'm Jewish and I'm very big into, I lost relatives in the Holocaust. Okay? So I was very big into that stuff. And there was an issue with Facebook where I challenged them, and some others of us challenged them. I called out Facebook for allowing Holocaust denial on their content on their site because they prohibit hate speech. And I took the position that Holocaust denial is a form of anti-Semitic hate speech because there's no...
I mean, it is.
Yeah. And so it got picked up by CNN. And all of a sudden, where Facebook just didn't care about me, sloughed me off, laughed at me, all of a sudden they had to answer for it. And then all of these bloggers were chiming in, and all of a sudden it was a big deal. And so I'm on CNN for the first time in my life. This is back in 2008. If you actually Google it, you can probably find an archived article about it. But so I got invited to speak at Facebook about First Amendment and Holocaust denial. And I knew they were trying to sandbag me. This guy, I won't name his name, but he was just the biggest jerk. He was their public policy, and he was... and he was trying to sandbag me. And so I changed the site, and I kind of threw him a curveball and talked about something else. But I got to meet Randy Zuckerberg and when Facebook's original headquarters in Palo Alto, very nice cafeteria. It was all very cool. It was all very cool. All very cool. But, and so... all of a sudden, my Wikipedia page shows that I'm this First Amendment expert. I didn't create it. I never created it. I've never claimed to be a First Amendment expert, right? But I don't know where I was going with that, but the whole thing was kind of bizarre.
That's funny.
But so I am not a First Amendment expert for anyone who reads my Wikipedia page. I got some notice for an issue with Facebook, and it wasn't even. The irony is, it's not even a First Amendment issue because Facebook's a private company. The First Amendment doesn't regulate what Facebook can say what Facebook posts.
So we mentioned a little bit about using psychedelics to treat addiction stuff. Can you expand upon that?
No, I don't consider myself an expert in psychedelics. I'll tell you, if it's evidence-based, I'm for it. Okay. That's it. If there's evidence to support it, what I don't believe in is anecdotal support. I'm just, and yes, I get people say, well, evidence is anecdotes. Well, yeah, it's 10,000 anecdotes put together and analyzed, right?
Yeah.
So if there's evidence for it and it's evident, and it's strong, yes, do it. Do it. If there was evidence, like I said, if there was an evidence-based study that's standing on your head for 3 hours a day or an hour a day cured addiction, I'd say do it if it was evidence-based.
I'll tell you an anecdote about somebody standing on their head literally. There was a guy who he was overweight and wanted to get into shape, and he wanted to learn how to stand on his head and figure that out. And so he went through all these things, and eventually he got to the point to where he could do the headstand.
Oh, very cool.
So that's actually a literal thing.
Yeah.
You could probably search it on YouTube for that guy.
Whether it's MMDA, MMDA for depression, PTSD, whether it's psychedelics, Suboxone, right?
So what is Suboxone?
Suboxone is...
I've heard of methadone, but I don't know what Suboxone is.
I don't want to get it wrong. Suboxone is almost... Suboxone allows you to function, and if you have substance use disorder, I don't want to try to get technical and then get it wrong, because I'm also not a toxicologist and understand the. So if you have substance use disorder, opioid use disorder, whether it's heroin or fentanyl, Suboxone allows you to dial it back and to either move towards, if you want to, abstinence, if that's your goal, or move towards just, if it's not your goal, a place where you can live your best life. As Samsung defines it, how you define it. If your relationships, all of a sudden your marriage is great, you're on Suboxone, you're able to work, you have relationships with your kids, to me, that's a definition of recovery. And that's where you get into these arguments with a lot of the hardcore 12-steppers. That's not recovery. Recovery, a lot of them will say, I'm for Suboxone as long as it's geared, as long as the final goal is abstinence, right? That's great. If that's your goal, that's not my place to say.
Right.
You know, it's not my place to define your recovery.
I think the final goal, I just always find that get to healthy, whatever healthy is for you. Healthy
and you know, and what type of, how arrogant do I have to be and pompous to tell you what healthy is, to tell you what recovery is? It just drives me, you know, ugh.
So when you were deep in your addiction and all that was going on, how did your family react to you about that?
Well, that's a great question, and let's go to the summer of 2005. Until that point, it really wasn't in anyone's face, right? My brothers knew I went out and partied. You know, you'd see me out, but it wasn't like I was, you know, saying, "Oh, here's my cocaine." You know, I would go to down on Henderson where they used to have Sense. And then you had Medici and all these bars where I was going in the bathroom and just snorting it up. Candle Room. And so I have a funny story with that too. But it stopped being fun. And I was dealing with depression and failed marriages. And in the summer of 2005, I just lost all hope that I would ever look in the mirror. Because under all this, I hated myself. I absolutely hated myself. That was why I was constantly high, because I constantly hated myself. And so to offset that, I had to be constantly high or drunk.
When and what changed? When did you make a change?
Easter weekend 2007. But let's talk about 2005 first, because I lost all hope and decided to end my life by suicide. I sent a disturbing email to a friend. He immediately reached out to Mark and Jeff, my brothers. Jeff showed up at my house. I had a .45 automatic on my nightstand. There was cocaine everywhere, Xanax, because I was literally cocaining through the night and Xanaxing through the day. I got called down to an ex-parte TRO hearing for a client when I had just popped 2 Xanax after an all-night cocaine. So I show up. And I show up, and fortunately, it was a slam dunk, right? But I'm unshaven. I threw on a suit, and I'm unshaven, and the judge really was just looking at her stuff, denied. And I really didn't have to say anything, but every few words, and no one said a word. But that happened more than once, where I would show up like that. But so they had my brother show up, and I'm zonked out, and the weapon's on my nightstand. And I'm planning on using it. So they clean up the site, they clean up all the stuff, take the weapon, and drive me kicking and screaming down to my first of 2 trips in my life to Green Oaks Hospital, down in Medical City. Now it's just called Medical City Hospital, I believe. And kicking and screaming, they're trying to save my life, and all I want is for my 2 brothers trying to get out of my life. I just want them to leave me alone, and I want them to let me go back to the people who really love me and don't judge me, at least until the cocaine runs out, right? The people who I partied with, other lawyers, other people half my age, and this and that. Just let me go back to my hole, to my dirty, unshaven, just nasty old, uncleaned up, dirty household. And they weren't having any of it. So we go in and go through intake, and I'm sitting in this room with this attending psychiatrist, a psychiatric nurse, and my 2 brothers screaming at them. And you want to know how I know this? Because I ordered my records from Green Oaks. And I did it partially as a cathartic moment, but I also, if anyone ever said that never happened, I wanted to, being the lawyer, if anyone's ever said that never happened.
You're always trying to prove the case of whatever the truth is. Just
you're a liar, that never happened. I questioned it. I wanted to have the records.
Yeah.
And so I was just screaming at them, blaming them and Mark especially for every problem in my life. And so I also said to myself, you're not doing this to me. What are the standards in Texas? And my head's clearing, okay, I wasn't going to use that gun. I'm not a danger to myself. I'm not a danger to others.
Yep.
They evaluated me for bipolar disorder and decided I did not have that, and I was just depressed. And that's all I wanted them to think. So much to the chagrin of my brothers, they couldn't hold me there. They couldn't, the doctor wasn't willing to.
How long were you there? 3 days? Or?
No, just the day.
Wow.
just because they couldn't hold me. They couldn't put a psychiatric hold on me, which is what which was what my brothers wanted.
That's surprising.
Yeah, they wouldn't do it. And so we were able to dial it back. And here's where privilege comes in too. I'm standing in the lobby and my brothers were looking in the yellow pages. I could have gone, this is massive privilege, and I admit it, because just the most minute percentage of the population has, a billionaire brother willing to do these things. Less than zero, we can string out the zeros in the one. But I could have flown to any treatment center in the world from right there, and I refused. They're opening the yellow pages, looking. And so I said, just take me home. Just take me home. They had no choice. So we did what I call the Cuban rehab. They drove me home, took my car keys, and said, just stay in your house for a couple of weeks and sober up, and we'll get through this. And I thought to myself, I had a couple thoughts.
Did they leave somebody out like watching?
No. My first thought was, one, no problem. My drug dealer delivers, the Dallas Mavericks ticket guy. And two, my second thought, getting back around to the point you brought up, now they know. Now it's in their face.
Yeah.
Now you're not just seeing me out the clubs,
Yeah.
Not worrying, Brian's just living his life or whatever.
Yeah.
Now it's in their face that I'm struggling and that I have a drug problem. What am I going to do? What are my options? I could get help. Nah. I could ask them, I could ask for support from them. Nah. I could distance myself from them so they never see me. I could not see my nieces and nephews. I could not see my father who lived across the street from me, and just crawl back in my hole and do the things that I do. Ding, 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 I'll do that.
That sounds like a good thing.
And it sounded perfectly logical to me. And that's what I did. Didn't see my nieces and nephews, didn't see my brothers, didn't see my father.
How long?
I don't want to put a time. It went on for, we're getting close to rock bottom. So didn't go on that long. And so my life was just now going out. And how did I support myself? I no longer had any clients with. My brother Mark, again, privileged, he was supporting me. And isn't that enablement? Yeah, but I'm alive. Mm-hmm. I'm alive. His love and their love saved me, right? Mm-hmm. So it is, but if we look at enablement in the rearview mirror, I am alive today sitting here. And so
there's always what's the choice between that?
Yeah. And it's a tough choice, because a lot of families, I'll say it ad nauseum, privilege. We had deep pockets. A lot of families go bankrupt trying to figure out that.
Oh, we've seen it a lot.
Trying to figure out that area between love and enablement, right? I know families where they have spent every cent they had, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and still lost their child.
I've seen it too.
Yeah, we can talk about the treatment industry another time, but so I went right back out. Fast forward to Easter week. I met a girl. I was January of 2006. I was out celebrating my, what would have been, 61, my 45th birthday. And I'm at this bar on Knox Henderson, and I'm coked up and I'm drunk. And I meet this girl. Her name's Amanda. So we're talking, and I guess I had on the last mask I was able to wear to convince her that I was this respectable lawyer, which I wasn't. That I was gainfully employed, which I wasn't. And that I was this all-around great guy, which I wasn't.
So you're proving that it's probably not the greatest place to find a husband or wife is at a bar in Knox Henderson.
Well, we were able to survive it, but...
No, actually, it
worked out.
Yeah, found her.
And so we started dating. I was able to convince her to move in with me, and she didn't know anything about my issues. And I remember when she moved in, one of my buddies said, "You do what you do. She doesn't do what you do. How's that going to work?"
That's a really good point.
Yeah. And I said, well, I'm going to stop. So now I'm starting to think about it. The stages of change. I'm in the first stage of change. I'm contemplating stopping.
Okay, good.
Right. So that's going to be the impetus for me to stop. But that's not how addiction works either. She moved in and I didn't stop. I just hid it better. Yep. She goes away Easter weekend 2007. She goes away to visit her family, who at that time lived in Houston. Now they live in East Texas. I went out.
This sounds awfully like how who's the main character in
Jason.
Ambulance? How Jason got found out.
Yeah, it does. It does. You
Is there a
write.
that's
You write what you know.
Remarkable coincidence.
Yeah,
huh?
you write what you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, he got found out in a hotel room
yeah.
by his girlfriend. So she goes away for the weekend. I go to the Omni. I go out and go down to the Ghost Bar at the Omni, with now defunct Ghost Bar, across from the arena. And I figured it was Friday evening. I'm going to meet some friends down there. And she's not coming back till Sunday evening. And I'll get back and I'll be cleaned up. She'll never know. I had a blackout. The next thing I know, it's Sunday evening. I don't know where. I open my eyes. She's in the room. She's looking down at me. I had lost Friday to Sunday.
Oh, wow.
And I'm looking around.
Where were you at when you come to?
I was in my bed. She came home. I woke up in my bed 2 days later.
Oh, wow.
How
I
long
had
were
a
you blacked
blackout
out?
from Friday evening to Sunday evening.
That long?
Yeah. I don't know where the 2 days went.
Wow.
Yeah. I had no idea where and I still can't remember those 2 days.
Were you like getting up and going to the bathroom and coming back, or were you like?
I don't remember.
He doesn't remember.
I don't remember.
That is crazy.
I don't remember.
Wow.
And
Okay, so
I've
then
only
what
had one other blackout in my life is when someone slipped me GHB in Vegas.
Oh wow. Do you think somebody slipped you something?
Yeah,
at
it was.
Ghost-
Yeah, absolutely, without my consent. And so,
Wow.
but I still don't remember those 2 days.
Well, then
Now,
what-
people who are there have pieced it together for me to some degree since, but
What did they piece together?
that I was a total during those 2 days. And, you lose when you have a blackout, you lose your inhibitions, right?
Right.
That's
Oh,
the
sure.
part you lose.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you don't form the short-term memories, don't store.
Right.
And so I know I just lost it. And she's looking down, and I'm looking up, and I'm trying to get my senses. I have no idea what time it is, what day it is. And I'm looking around. She's probably trying to figure out whether she walked in the right house. And I'm looking, there's cocaine everywhere.
Oh, shit.
And she's, well, what's going on here? And I'm trying to, and now I'm trying to babbling, and all I could think of was kind of running home to Mama. So I have a problem. Take me back to Green Oaks Hospital. Back? You've been to Green Oaks?
Oh, no.
So we'll talk about
We
later.
have a whole new conversation
Yeah,
now.
we'll talk about that later, but right now I just need some time to think of a lie to explain this Law and Order episode orgy of evidence that I just might not be the person I represented myself to be. And so she drives me to Green Oaks, and she's crying, and we're standing in the parking lot of Green Oaks Hospital waiting for intake for the second time in my life. And she's crying, and I'm thinking she's gone, I'd go. And as we've talked about, she stood by me. We dated for over a decade while I rebuilt the broken trust. And now we've been married, we've been together going close to 17 years.
That's
I'm married
awesome.
5.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And so not all relationships will survive that. Many don't. But ours
Correct.
was able to, 1, because she is a saint, 2, because she's a saint, and 3, because I had to do the work for me, the recovery work. I couldn't do it for her, spouses leave.
right.
I couldn't do it for my father, parents pass.
Yep.
I couldn't do it for my brothers, siblings die. I couldn't do it for my cats. Trauma. Life is about trauma, right?
Yeah.
I mean, trauma is inevitable.
Yeah.
And it is part of life. Trauma is part of life. And trauma is a major trigger for relapse.
Yeah.
Couldn't
Yep.
be about them. It had to do it for me.
Yep.
And so,
Have to do it for you.
yeah. And I thought about my father. That was the second thing I thought about. I thought about my father, who was a veteran of the Pacific, the Navy, a CB, was at the Battle of Okinawa,
Wow.
served and fought in Korea. My father was the greatest generation.
Yeah.
My father, who's the middle of 3 boys. This is always where I have to keep from cracking up. We're the middle of 3 boys like me. And my father, who said to Mark, Jeff, and I growing up in Pittsburgh, PA, all the time, guys, no matter where you go in life, you may go your different ways, different states, different parts of the world, but wherever you go, you pick up that phone and you make sure your brother's okay. You tell your brother you love him. This was the gift that he had with his brothers. This is the gift that he passed down to us.
Probably need to do that with my brothers today.
And
Lesson.
he,
yeah.
and
Getting a
so,
pretty clear message about that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to lose that gift. And if you want to know how that gift stuck, all these decades later, 1,200 miles from Pittsburgh, Mark, Jeff, and I live walking distance from each other. And until my father passed away in 2018, he lived across the street from me. And I don't mean metaphorically. I mean walk out the door over to his
that
place.
house.
That's right. across,
Yeah.
across the street.
Yeah.
And that is, I didn't think there would be a third trip back because I'd be dead. And that is what finally brought me around to a different mindset. A mindset of, I want to live. A mindset of, I'm scared, but I still want to live. A mindset of, I don't want to lose my family. And I was ready.
Brilliant.
Thank you for sharing that.
And I think that's a great way to end this episode
Yes.
of the Lawyer Dana podcast. We're going to maybe have some more, hopefully have some more, if you got some more to talk
Yeah, I
about.
have a little bit of time because
Okay.
I'll tell you what the process was after that. I had a
Perfect.
little bit of a headache, so we may have to, all the talking.
We're here for however much you want and are happy to do.
Okay.
And we will see y'all on the next episode of
Yes.
the Lawyer Dana podcast.
Like our
subscribe,
page.
give us some comments. Tell us what you want to see on the episode. Guests that you want. If you got questions for our guests, we'll still be able to get in contact with them. And
Or
things.
if you're somebody that would like to come on to our podcast, comment below.
And there's a lot of resources that are going to be in the notes of these shows. If you have any kind of eating disorders or substance issues, ways that you
Oh,
need
sorry,
help,
you're still
please
talking
reach
to the
out.
camera, and I'm still here looking over on my phone. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Probably only on that camera. So, but if it's funny, it works. So we'll see you on the next episode.
The Lawyer Dana Podcast.